She didn't need to check the screen. The caller ID was burned into her memory. This was it, the pitch, the once-in-a-lifetime showcase that could finally rip her from the shadows of half-empty coffeehouses and slam poetry joints into real, lasting recognition. Her hands trembled. Her heart? Loud enough to drown out the jazz playing faintly on the car radio. She pressed the call to voicemail. "Just hold on," she whispered to no one. 5 more minutes, just 5. Then came another buzz. This time, a text from her manager. "Where are you?" "They're prepping now. Don't screw this up, Trish. This is big." She winced. Her fingers left the wheel for half a second, just to tap out a 3-word reply. "On my way." The light ahead flickered yellow, then red. "Hello, my wonderful and beautiful family. Before we dive into this story, please, if this touches your heart, if it moves something inside you, take a second to like and comment below. It helps YouTube recommend our stories to more people who need them. Your love keeps this storytelling family alive. Now, let me take you into her story." She stopped. Rain pounded like 1,000 nervous fists on the roof. She rubbed at the fogging windshield with her sleeve, leaned in, squinting. The pedestrian light flashed white. Then it happened. A figure stepped off the curb. A man. A blur. The sound was sickening. Not loud, but final. A dull, sick thud that no scream could ever erase. Trish's scream cracked through the car. Her foot slammed the brake. Her head snapped forward, body frozen in disbelief. Her pulse scattered. Her thoughts blanked. She stumbled out of the car into the rain. Her boots splashed through puddles as she ran around the hood, breath hitching, heart somewhere between her ribs and her throat. He lay sprawled on the slick pavement, face half hidden beneath soaked black hair. Blood was seeping beneath him, glistening red against gray concrete. "Help," she shouted, looking wildly around. "Someone call an ambulance, please." Footsteps splashed. Horns honked. A crowd began to gather, but none of them mattered, because as she dropped to her knees beside him, she recognized the sharp jawline, the scar just beneath the chin. It was him. Sean Motley, the CEO, the man she'd been rehearsing songs for in her cheap apartment for the last 2 weeks. And now, he wasn't a billionaire in a suit. He was bleeding, unconscious, and broken on the street in front of her. Trish's voice trembled. "I didn't see you, I swear, I didn't." His chest rose shallowly, still breathing. Sirens wailed in the distance. Trish sat in a vinyl waiting room chair soaked through with cold sweat and rain. Her jeans clung to her skin. Her blouse, once a clean powder blue, was wrinkled, damp and clinging to her chest. She hadn't cried. Not yet. Not when they wheeled him into the ER. Not when they asked for her statement. Not when she called her manager and was told flatly it's over. But now her fingers curled tightly in her lap, and tears threatened to leak without her permission. The doctor emerged with a clipboard, eyes heavy behind his glasses. "Are you Trish Stratus?" She stood too quickly. "Yes." "Is he?" "He's alive," the doctor said, voice gentle but firm. "He sustained a spinal injury. We're still assessing the severity, but based on preliminary scans, paralysis from the waist down is probable." She swayed. "Permanent," she whispered. "We can't confirm that yet." His words blurred together after that. Words like trauma, rehabilitation, neural pathways, and contingency faded into the sterile walls. All Trish could hear was, "You changed his life. Possibly forever." The police had ruled it an accident. Her statement had matched the traffic camera footage. But she'd still been distracted. She'd looked at her phone. That was all the leverage any lawyer would need. And he was one of the most powerful men in the city. If he chose to bury her, he could. And maybe she deserved it. The lawyer was precise. Too neat. Everything from his slick hair to his charcoal suits screamed corporate discretion. He placed the stack of papers in front of her. "Mr. Motley is offering you a solution." Trish blinked. "A lawsuit?" The lawyer shook his head. "He's choosing not to pursue legal damages." She inhaled sharply. "Wait, he's not suing me?" He adjusted his glasses. "He's proposing an alternative." Trish leaned back, wary. What kind of alternative? A contractual marriage? The words punched the air from her lungs. She laughed. Nervously. "You're joking. I assure you, Miss Stratus. He's not. I hit him with a car." Now he wants to marry me? The lawyer remained completely composed. His condition will invite media attention. He's always been private. This marriage provides him a narrative, one that buys him time and peace. In exchange, you'll receive protection, financial and reputational. Trish's mouth was dry. So I become, what? His PR shield? If the marriage holds for 6 months, you'll receive 7 figures and complete release from any further claims. A clean slate. 7 figures? She whispered. Yes. She folded her arms, heart pounding. I've never done something like this before. The lawyer finally blinked. He hasn't either. No music, no vows, no kiss. Just a signature, a wheelchair, and a contract with her name on it. She was Trish Stratus Motley now, and he still hadn't looked her in the eye. T was the kind of house you saw on architectural magazines. Glass walls, steel framing, minimalistic interiors with breathtaking views of the Sound. Sean's bedroom was on the top floor. Hers? Far across the hall. He sat near the fire, draped in cashmere, posture straight even in the chair. You're not to touch me unless I request it, he said, voice smooth, distant. We'll maintain separate quarters. I'll arrange a staff schedule. You'll attend my public events, support my therapy, and maintain your image as a devoted partner. Trish stood still, coat clinging to her arms. Her voice was barely audible. Do you hate me? He looked up slowly. For the first time in weeks, their eyes met. His were green, not cold, just tired. No, he said, but I don't trust you. Not yet. She nodded, lips trembling. This wasn't a dream, and it definitely wasn't love. It was survival. If you're still watching, please don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment below. Your thoughts help us keep telling these stories, and YouTube shows them to more people when you interact. Let's keep this storytelling family strong. Trish Stratus had always believed music would save her. Now, the only thing saving her was a marriage contract. The silence inside Sean Motley's estate was louder than anything she'd ever heard. No footsteps, no laughter, no conversations drifting from a living room. Just space, air-conditioned, high-ceilinged, emotionally sterile space. It had been 3 days since she'd signed the papers and stepped into a marriage that didn't require love, only appearances. 3 days since she'd last heard her own music. The ring on her finger felt heavy. Not because of its carat size. Sean had refused to get her one. It would send the wrong message, he'd said, eyes avoiding hers. This isn't a romance. She wasn't even mad. She was just hollow. Put this on, the assistant said, laying a cream-colored dress on her bed. Trish stared. Where are we going? Mr. Motley's first public appearance since the accident. It's a charity event. You'll be attending as his wife. Trish swallowed. Will there be press? Yes. You'll speak briefly about your support for his recovery. Nothing emotional, just composed. Trish nodded. Her voice stayed behind in the sheets. The gala was held in a glass atrium overlooking the water. Trish stood beside Sean's wheelchair, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Cameras flashed. She tried to smile, but her lips barely moved. Sean spoke calmly to donors, never once looking at her. To them, he was the fallen genius rebuilding himself. And she was the loyal wife, the woman who stayed. But inside her chest, something cracked, not from shame, from invisibility. Her room smelled of lavender and leather. His door stayed closed. She changed into sweatpants, walked barefoot across the marble kitchen floor, and sat at the piano in the corner of the living room. Soft keys, a minor chord, a verse she'd been writing before the crash drifted back. She began to play it, quietly, like a secret. Then she heard the sound. His wheels. She didn't turn, but she knew he was there, just behind her. He listened for almost 2 minutes before speaking. You wrote that? She nodded, still facing the keys. It's unfinished. He said nothing else, just turned and wheeled away. But for the first time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Trish had never seen a man sweat so much and stay silent. Sean's grip trembled on the parallel bars. Muscles in his arms clenched. His therapist gave a steady rhythm. 2 steps. Rest. 2 steps. He did it without flinching. But Trish saw it, the twitch at the corner of his mouth, the pain in his jaw from biting back sound. Afterwards, He slumped into the chair, eyes closed. She brought him a bottle of water. You should let them adjust the session time. You look... I'm fine. He didn't thank her, didn't look up. She left the water on the floor beside him and walked away. But he drank it. She found the kitchen empty that night. No staff, no chef. Just a note scribbled in angular handwriting on the marble island. Needed space. Don't wait up. Sean Trish stood there in silence. Then, with nothing better to do, she opened the fridge. She cooked for the first time in weeks. Not fancy. Just comfort, spicy chicken pasta, her mother's old recipe. The sauce was too thick, the noodles a little soft. But when she took a bite, something inside her loosened. The food made her remember she was still human. And maybe, so was he. The call came early. Miss Stratus, the agency rep said, her voice clipped and professional. There's a rumor that you married Mr. Motley for a settlement. Gossip blogs are digging. We'll prepare a statement, but please refrain from comments. Trish blinked. What if I want to say something? You won't. We'll handle it. She hung up, anger rising like smoke. They were shaping her like clay, molding her into someone she didn't recognize. She found Sean that afternoon in the library. He was reading. Always reading. She stood in the doorway for several seconds before speaking. They're spinning stories about me. He didn't look up. They always will. Her chest tightened. You could say something. One sentence. One press release. He turned the page. It would make it worse. Trish exhaled hard. Then what exactly am I here for, Sean? This time, he met her gaze. For the silence, the room felt colder. She turned and left before she broke. The mansion was dark. Everyone asleep. Trish wandered back to the piano. She didn't know why. Her fingers itched for expression. She played again. Something low, mournful, raw. She didn't notice he'd joined her until he spoke from the shadows. I dreamed of music once, he said quietly. Before code. She stopped playing. Why didn't you follow it? She asked. Because logic is easier than emotion. Silence. Then he asked, almost a whisper, do you regret saying yes? She paused. Yes, she said, but not for the reasons you think. He didn't ask what she meant, and she didn't explain. They had brunch with investors. Trish wore beige. Sean wore steel gray. They looked like a polished couple in the magazine photos taken from afar, but under the table, her hand sat alone, and his never moved. She left a plate of food outside his study. He opened the door 2 hours later. The plate was empty when she checked. It wasn't a thank you, but it wasn't nothing. The therapist guided Sean onto the bars again. Trish watched as his hands trembled. Then he stumbled. Hard. His weight dropped suddenly, too fast for the assistant. Without thinking, she rushed forward and caught him under the arms. They froze, faces inches apart. His eyes widened. Her hands were firm against his torso. Then he gritted his teeth. Let go. She did, but slowly, carefully, because in that moment she felt it, not resentment, not anger. Fear. He was scared, not of falling, but of needing someone. She pulled out her guitar for the first time since the crash. Soft strumming, new lyrics, honest ones. I'm not the villain in your pain. I'm just the ghost behind your flame. You built the walls to keep me near, but now I'm trapped in your idea of fear. She didn't expect anyone to hear it, but from behind the cracked door, he did. And he didn't stop listening until the final note faded. The house was silent, but tension lived in the walls. Trish paced her room barefoot, robe tied loosely, her hair still damp from a late shower. On the nightstand, her phone screen glowed with untouched notifications, texts from her manager, comments from strangers online, and one email from an anonymous account titled, Gold Digger Marries Broken Billionaire. Proof inside. She didn't open it. Didn't need to. The whispers outside the walls were growing. The blogs had latched on. Rumors, threads, blurry photos from the charity gala. Everything about her was being dissected. But inside this mansion, inside this strange marriage, no one said a word. Not even Sean, especially not Sean. She came downstairs to find the chef had already served his meal. Her plate was still covered with a silver lid, untouched. A quiet reminder that in this house, schedules were fixed, and she wasn't expected to share them. She lifted the lid anyway. Eggs. avocado, toast. But her appetite stayed upstairs. Across the dining hall, Sean read the news on his tablet, sipping his cinnamon tea like it was ritual. Trish cleared her throat. You always drink that? He didn't glance up. It helps me focus. She pulled the chair out, slowly. Smells good. You hate cinnamon, he said, without looking. She blinked. How did you know that? His lips didn't move. You avoided it at the last 2 events, twice at dinner, and once in your protein shake. Her chest tightened. He was noticing. He was watching, but only when he thought she couldn't tell. The afternoon sun poured into the home therapy room. Sean was drenched in sweat again, every muscle taut with determination. The therapist encouraged from the side, but it was Trish's quiet applause that made his eyes flick toward her. He walked, barely, 1 step, then another, and then his knees buckled. He growled under his breath as he dropped back into the chair. The therapist nodded. Still a win, Mr. Motley. But he didn't celebrate. Not until Trish crouched beside the chair with a small towel. You're strong, she said, gently dabbing sweat from his temple. His hand caught hers before she pulled away. I didn't ask you to touch me. Her throat tightened. You didn't have to. For a second, his fingers held her in place, not forcefully, just lingering. Then he let go. She rose without another word. She found the envelope tucked into a kitchen drawer. It had fallen behind a stack of maintenance invoices. Curiosity got the better of her. Inside, a copy of the NDA and a personal letter, not signed, but it was his handwriting. This arrangement is not punishment. It is protection. For you, for me, for the version of myself I'm trying to rebuild. If you're reading this, then maybe, one day, you'll understand why I did it this way. Her fingers trembled. He hadn't written it for lawyers. He'd written it for her. That night, she walked into his study. He was in his chair, a single lamp casting gold over stacks of papers. She didn't knock. I saw your letter. He didn't move. She stepped closer. You were trying to protect me? His jaw worked slowly. From the press, from the sharks, from what it looks like when a man with more power than sense ruins a girl's life. Again. She crossed her arms. What do you mean again? He leaned back in the chair, voice low. I've had 3 assistants quit because of rumors. One investor's daughter tried to seduce me for equity. My last relationship ended in an article titled, He bought her everything, but not her soul. Trish swallowed hard. I don't sleep around, he said. I figured, she replied. But why me? You didn't want anything, he said, finally looking up. When you hit me, you didn't ask for my forgiveness. You cried in that hospital hallway like you were the one who lost something. That's when I knew. Knew what? That if I was going to put my name next to someone, I needed it to be someone who didn't need it. Trish stood in silence for a beat too long, then whispered, I've never done this before. He nodded. Neither have I. She heard him again that night, at the piano. Only this time, he was the one playing. The notes were uneven, hesitant, but intentional. She stood in the hallway, hidden by the shadows, listening. It was the melody she'd played days ago. Not exact, but close. He was trying. She leaned against the wall and smiled for the first time in a week. They passed in the hallway. Close, too close. She reached for the doorknob to her room, but her shoulder brushed his chest. She froze. So did he. His breath caught. Then, without warning, his hand reached out, slowly, and brushed a strand of her hair behind her ear. I remember you wore that shade of lipstick when we met. Trish blinked, caught in his voice. I wasn't wearing lipstick, she whispered. He gave the faintest smile. I know. Silence wrapped around them. He stepped back. She opened the door, but neither of them closed it. Not right away. The media continued to spin. Trish's manager called again. I can't book you anything. Every venue's nervous. They say you're poison right now. Her voice cracked. And the project with Soundfire? Dropped you. Trish hung up, not because she didn't care, but because crying again wouldn't change anything. She wandered into the music room, laid her phone on the carpet, and sank beside the piano bench. He found her there 10 minutes later, sitting, silent. Still, you okay? He asked. No. He didn't offer empty comfort, didn't tell her to be strong. Instead, he sat beside her on the floor. and for the first time, just sat. She woke to find a note under her door. "Meet me in the greenhouse, 8 a.m. Don't be late." Trish blinked at it, heart thudding. She hadn't been summoned since their wedding day. She dressed quickly and made her way to the glass-encased garden on the 3rd floor. Sunlight filtered through the ceiling. Sean stood near the orchids, standing. No chair, no bars, just him, one hand resting on a support beam, sweat already beading at his temple. "You're standing. I've been practicing when no one's looking." "Why?" He looked at her. "Because if I'm going to start again, I want to start with you seeing all of me." Trish stepped closer. Her hands found his waist, carefully. His eyes never left hers. "I've never," she whispered again. He reached up, brushed his knuckles along her jaw. "You're the first person I've ever wanted to trust." The estate was a palace of steel and silence. It perched over Puget Sound like a ship anchored on a cliff with sprawling glass walls that let you see everything, and yet feel completely unseen. Every room looked like it belonged in a design magazine. Expensive furniture that no one used. Hallways that stretched longer than necessary. No photos, no clutter, and definitely no warmth. Sean Motley's house wasn't a home. It was a fortress, and Trish Stratus was just a tenant. Trish woke to her phone's silent alarm. The room was still dim, sun bleeding through the charcoal curtains. She walked barefoot to the balcony and opened the doors to the ocean air. Cold, clean, distant. Down below, through the glass atrium, she could already see Sean, wheeling himself into the gym. Same time every day, 6 a.m., sharp. Discipline, she realized, was how he kept from drowning. By 7, she was dressed for the day, at least from the waist up. Sean's staff held tight schedules. She'd learned quickly that the chef arrived at 7:30, the assistant checked, and by 8 and by 9, the entire household moved like synchronized gears. Except her. She wandered. She observed. She survived. "Don't touch anything," Sean said, without looking up from his tablet. Trish froze at the threshold of his home office. "I wasn't going to." He finally looked up, then gestured for her to come in. The room was floor-to-ceiling walnut shelves, lined with books in perfect alphabetical order. A custom-built desk sat in front of a widescreen monitor showing code. Lines of it. Endless. She stepped inside. He motioned to a wall of panels. Everything is voice-controlled. Lights, doors, blinds, security. Sounds expensive. It is. She let her fingers trail across the back of a nearby leather chair, careful not to sit. "And all this is just for you?" His voice didn't waver. "Everything in this house is just for me." She bit the inside of her cheek. "So, where do I fit?" A beat of silence passed. "In the music room," he said. "And at my public events." They rarely shared meals, but that night they happened to collide in the kitchen. No chef, just leftovers. Sean sat at the marble island, eating grilled salmon. Trish grabbed a plate of reheated pasta and joined him. For a moment it felt normal, until she noticed him watching. "What?" He set his fork down. "You eat like you're apologizing." She blinked. "Excuse me? You hold your fork like you expect it to be taken from you." Trish blinked, caught off guard. He wasn't wrong. She looked down, then back up. "And you eat like you're alone in a room full of strangers." That made him smirk. It wasn't big, but it was real. And it was the first time she'd seen anything close to a smile from him. Trish wandered into the West Wing, an area she hadn't explored. She found a locked door. Odd. Most of the house was open. She glanced around, then tried the knob again. No luck. That night at dinner, she brought it up. "What's in the West Wing?" Sean didn't flinch. "Storage." She tilted her head. "You don't strike me as the store it and forget it type. I'm also not the explain myself type." His tone was flat, final, but she saw something flicker behind his eyes. A memory, maybe, or regret. She didn't push, but she made a mental note. She woke from a nightmare, sweating, shaking, her breath trapped in her throat. She didn't remember all of it, just headlights, wet pavement, and the sound of metal bending. Her hand trembled as she reached for the glass of water beside her bed. And then she heard something. A voice. Soft, low. Sean, singing. She crept out of her room and followed the sound. down the hallway, toward the piano room. There he was, in his chair, back to her, singing an off-key lullaby. It was the same melody she'd hummed weeks ago. She stood frozen in the doorway. He stopped. "I couldn't sleep," he said, without turning. "Me either," she whispered. He didn't ask what her dream was, and she didn't ask what his song meant, but they stayed in the same room for the rest of the night, apart but not alone. At brunch, Trish stared at her cup of tea, untouched. Sean sipped his usual cinnamon blend. Finally, she asked, "Why haven't you ever been in love?" He looked up, surprised. "That's a loaded question for cereal hour." "I'm serious." He wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Because I don't like gambling with things I can't control. Love isn't a gamble. It is when people change their minds." She narrowed her gaze. "You think everyone walks away?" "I know they do." Her voice lowered. "Is that why you never touched me? Not even once?" His eyes darkened. "I don't touch what I don't trust. Then why let me live here, share your name?" "Because," he said, setting his fork down, "I don't want to be alone. I just don't want to be hurt." The silence stretched between them. But it wasn't empty. It was layered. Like grief, they bumped into each other in the hallway again. Literally, her shoulder against his chest. But this time, neither moved back. His hand hovered, then landed softly on her waist. Trish's breath caught. His fingers weren't possessive, just present. A moment later they were gone, but her skin burned with the memory. He didn't speak, neither did she, but something shifted. The house felt less like a trap, and more like a possibility. By the time the leaves began turning gold outside the tall windows, something else was changing inside the house. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't crash or explode. It crept, like heat slowly returning to frostbitten skin. Sean wasn't softer. He was still disciplined, measured, often distant. But he started asking questions about her lyrics, about her childhood, about why she avoided coffee after 4 p.m. and Trish. She started answering. It was a small thing, but it happened. She passed his office mid-morning and noticed the door was ajar. Not open enough for an invitation, but not closed either. Inside, he was deep in code. Eyes locked on the screen, fingers moving fast. She didn't speak, didn't walk in, but she lingered in the hallway a little longer, long enough for him to notice. He didn't ask her to leave. Trish sat at the piano with a mug in hand, writing. Sean rolled into the room quietly. He didn't speak, just watched. She took a sip of her tea and made a face. "Still hate cinnamon," she muttered. "I had the kitchen restock your green chai," he said. She blinked. "You remembered?" "I always do." Their eyes met across the room, and for the first time, she believed it. The storm hit hard that night. Thunder shook the windows. The sky opened like someone had ripped a seam straight across it. Trish curled up in the corner of the music room, guitar in lap. She didn't notice him until he spoke. "You play differently when it rains." She glanced up. "How would you know?" "I've been listening." He wheeled closer, slowly, respectfully. "May I sit?" "You already are." He smirked faintly and parked beside her. She played a new melody, gentle, honest. He listened with his full body, shoulders soft, expression unguarded. "Do you always write from pain?" he asked. "Not always," she said, "but it's usually where I start." "Then where do you end?" She looked at him, eyes calm. Hope. The hallway felt smaller that morning. They moved in sync. He was at the door as she reached for the knob. Her hand brushed his. He didn't pull away. Neither did she. He turned the knob instead, letting her walk ahead. She didn't miss the glance he cast over her shoulder, and he didn't miss the smile she failed to hide. Trish returned from a short meeting with the label. More rejection, more damage. They wanted scandal, not talent. She shut the door to her room and leaned against it. Then she saw it, on her pillow. A note. "They don't know what they're losing, but I do. Keep writing. I'm still listening." S. She held the paper to her chest like it was oxygen. They were in the sunroom. He was reading. She was sketching song titles. Something in her chest stirred. Maybe it was the way the light made his features softer. Maybe it was the note, but something moved her. She stood, walked over, and kissed his cheek. Quick, barely there. His eyes met hers in stillness. "What was that for?" he asked. "For seeing me." His throat worked around the reply. But he didn't speak, and she didn't apologize. That night she passed by his door. It was open. He was standing between the parallel bars. Sweat poured down his neck. His arms trembled. He looked up, not startled, ready. "You don't have to watch," he said. "I want to." He nodded once. Step. Pause. Step. Wobble. She moved forward instinctively, but he didn't fall. He made it to the end of the bars, panting. Trish clapped once, softly. He smiled. And in that smile was something more powerful than victory. It was vulnerability. She sang. Quietly, just outside his door, "I found a man behind the storm who built a wall to feel less worn, but if you did let me in one crack I'd never ask to give it back, the door didn't open." But a shadow moved behind the glass, and she knew he was listening. Mornings in the Motley estate had become a ritual, silent, rhythmic, and strangely intimate. Trish would come downstairs and find her mug already placed at the end of the kitchen island. Green chai, steeped just right. No one ever said who prepared it. But she knew. And across from her, without fail, Sean would be sipping his cinnamon tea, sometimes reading, sometimes coding, sometimes just watching the ocean through the endless wall of glass. He rarely spoke first, but lately he didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't a void anymore. It was a thread, and it was tightening. The tea was too hot that morning. She hissed, pulling her hand back, nearly dropping the mug. Without thinking, Sean reached across the counter and grabbed her wrist. His thumb pressed gently against the inside of her palm. A single second passed. 2, then he let go. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded slowly, but her skin burned for reasons that had nothing to do with heat. The garden was always quiet after lunch. Trish found herself drawn to the glass greenhouse more than she expected, not for the plants, but because it was the only place where she felt she could breathe. He joined her there, unexpectedly, wheeling in with a laptop on his knees. Neither of them spoke for the first 20 minutes. Then, out of nowhere, Sean said, "You always hum when you're thinking." Trish looked up from her sketch pad. "I do?" He nodded. "Same melody, over and over. What does it sound like?" He didn't answer. He closed his laptop instead and repeated the notes softly with his fingers on the table. It was right. Perfectly right. She was stunned. "You remember that?" He met her eyes. "I remember everything about you." It started as a chuckle. She was teasing the chef, badly, for putting cayenne in the stew. The poor man flushed red, apologizing profusely. "It's all right," Trish said, laughing. "I'll just call it fire stew." Sean, watching from the end of the room, actually smiled. Not the tight, forced kind he gave to board members. A real one. Teeth, dimple, everything. She froze. He saw her freeze. Then he looked away, like he hadn't just shifted the entire atmosphere of the mansion with one expression. She couldn't stop smiling for the rest of the day. She caught him outside on the terrace just before sunset. The view was unreal, golden light bouncing off the water, birds flying low. Sean was in his chair, eyes half closed, tea in hand. She pulled up a lounge chair and sat beside him. "Do you miss walking?" He turned his head slowly. "Every second." She nodded, letting the honesty hang between them. Then he added, "But I miss trust more." She glanced over. "Trust? I was safer before the accident, closed off, unreachable." "You still are," she said, softly. He exhaled. "Less than you think." Their eyes met. No defenses, no masks, just truth. They were in the library. Trish climbed the ladder to reach the top shelf, trying to retrieve a songwriting memoir. She stretched. The book fell, right onto her head. "Damn! Ouch!" Sean wheeled over quickly. "You okay?" She laughed, rubbing her forehead. "Only my ego's bruised." He extended his hand instinctively, and didn't let go. Neither did he. A beat passed. She looked down at their hands. His thumb brushed hers. Then, slowly, he pulled back. But the air between them stayed charged. They were in the music room, late. She played. He listened. The lights were dim. The world had disappeared. She finished a verse and looked up, He was closer than she thought, much closer. His eyes scanned her face, not her lips, not her body. Her. She leaned forward, just slightly. His breath caught, but he stopped, right before contact. Not out of rejection, out of fear. "I don't want to get this wrong," he said, barely audible. Trish's heart ached. "You won't." He stepped back anyway. She didn't chase, but she didn't forget. He found her by the pool. The day was unusually warm. She had her feet in the water, headphones in, notebook resting against her knees. He rolled up beside her and tapped her arm. She pulled out one bud. He didn't speak. He just offered a small velvet box. Her breath stalled. She opened it. Inside, earphones, not diamonds, not jewelry, just the latest high-end studio monitors. She looked at him, touched. "You thought of this? I heard your left side keeps cutting out when you record." She blinked. "You really do listen." Always. They shared breakfast again. Same mugs, same glances. But this time, he reached for her hand across the island, deliberately, and she let him hold it. No words, no rush, just warmth. Shared, earned, real. It was almost midnight when Trish crept back into the music room. The mansion was asleep. The rain tapped soft rhythms against the glass, matching her pulse as she slid onto the piano bench. She didn't bother turning on the lights. The dark helped her think. The song was new, still forming. A melody had been haunting her all day, slow, aching, filled with longing she couldn't explain. Her fingers played tentatively, then with more confidence. And she sang, "You don't touch me, but I still burn. You don't say it, but I've learned that silence doesn't always mean stay away. Sometimes it means I'm scared you'll stay." She didn't hear him at first, but when she reached the final note, she felt him, standing, behind her, silent, present. "Sean." She turned. He wasn't in the chair. He wasn't using the bars. He stood, one hand braced against the edge of a table, chest rising and falling in uneven waves. "You're walking," she whispered. "A little," he murmured. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want the progress to feel like a performance. You were hiding it. I was protecting it." They stood in silence, her heart hammering against her ribs. His gaze dropped to her lips. She didn't move. "Why are you really here?" he asked softly. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. He moved, carefully, toward her. "Then let's stop pretending." She met him halfway. Their mouths collided, not forceful, but desperate. Like all the tension, the stolen glances, the unspoken admissions, finally found a place to land. His hands cupped her face, thumbs trembling. Her fingers curled around his neck, feeling the dampness from his sweat, the heat rolling off him like truth. He pulled back just enough to whisper, "Trish, I want this," she said. "I don't know how, neither do I." And then she kissed him again. He led her slowly up the stairs, not in the chair but one deliberate step at a time. She wrapped an arm around him, not to help, but to be close. At his bedroom door, he paused. "You don't have to," he said. "I want to. I've never done this before," he said, voice cracking. "I have," she whispered, "but I've never meant it like this." The bedroom was dim, the fireplace casting low amber light. He stood in front of her, uncertain. "I feel like I should know what to do," he said. "You don't have to know anything," she whispered. "Just feel." She slid off her sweater slowly, her eyes never leaving his. He exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. Her fingers reached for his shirt, undoing one button, then another. His muscles tensed beneath her touch. She paused. "Okay?" He nodded once. When their bodies finally pressed together, it wasn't rushed or clumsy. It was careful, intentional, reverent. She kissed the scar near his collarbone. He closed his eyes and let her guide him. And when he finally touched her, truly touched her, it was like the first time he had ever allowed himself to feel anything fully. His lips found her shoulder, then her collarbone. Her breath hitched. He moved slowly, not from uncertainty, but from awe, as though he were studying a language only she could speak. And she gave him everything, not out of pity, not from guilt, but from desire, from the quiet ache that had built for weeks between them. They didn't speak for a long time afterward. They lay tangled in the sheets, his head resting against her chest, her fingers tracing his spine. Finally, he whispered, I thought being with someone would make me feel exposed. And now, I feel full. She smiled into his hair. That's how I write songs, the good ones anyway. He looked up at her. Was that what we just did? Write a song? She kissed him once more. The first line, "Hello, my beautiful and amazing family. If you're still here, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps YouTube share these stories with others who need them just as much as you do. And if you have any thoughts about the story, I'd love to hear them in the comment section. Now let's dive right in." Seattle had gone quiet under a curtain of nightfall. The rain had stopped. The glass windows that wrapped the motley estate shimmered with fog. Refracting moonlight and city glow into soft, broken fragments. Trish sat cross-legged on the bed, the sheets tangled around her waist. Her guitar lay beside her, untouched. Her body was still humming from the night before, but her mind was louder than ever. He hadn't stayed, not out of coldness, out of habit. He'd kissed her gently after, brushed her cheek with the back of his hand, and whispered, "Sleep well." Then he retreated down the hall into the shadows, leaving her with warmth and questions. She expected him at breakfast. He wasn't there. The tea was still hot. The chair he usually claimed by the window sat empty. She checked the therapy room. Empty. Library. No sign. She opened her mouth to ask the assistant, but decided against it. Whatever this was, she had to find the answers herself. She hesitated before pushing it open. Sean wasn't there, but something was. A tablet left open on his desk. Her name was in the title of the folder. Curiosity fought with respect. Respect lost. She tapped. Inside were videos, therapy sessions, weeks of them. She watched one, then another, then another. In every single one, he was walking, not just taking steps, but improving. Standing unassisted, stretching, training with purpose. He had been walking long before last night. Her stomach twisted. Last night hadn't been the moment he reclaimed his legs. It had been the moment he decided she was worth revealing the truth to. Except, he hadn't revealed it. She'd discovered it. She was sitting on the piano bench, arms crossed, eyes locked on the strings, like they'd betrayed her too. He wheeled in quietly. "I was going to tell you," he said. She didn't move. "When?" "When I was ready." She turned toward him slowly. "You told me you couldn't walk. I said I was recovering. You hid the truth. You stood in front of me like it was the first time." His voice was low. It wasn't about deception. She stood. It was a test. He looked up, jaw clenched. Trish continued, "You needed to be sure that I wanted you, not out of guilt, not out of pity, that it was real." He didn't deny it. That silence said enough. She folded her arms tightly. "You touched me like I was everything, but you didn't trust me with anything." Sean finally stood up. No cane, no brace, just his own 2 legs. "I needed to know you'd stay for me," he said. Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. "I did stay," she whispered. "Even when the world said I was using you, even when my career tanked, even when you shut me out." "I never shut you out," he said. "You just didn't let me in." He didn't stop her. He didn't follow. She grabbed her guitar and nothing else. Not even the earrings she wore to their first gala. Not the dress he said she looked beautiful in. Not the velvet box he left on her nightstand with new headphones and a handwritten note. "I can't always say what I feel, but I feel everything when I'm near you." It was still there. So was the ache in her chest. She closed the door behind her, and this time, she didn't look back. Sean stood in the music room, the place where she'd brought color into the gray corners of his life. The silence was punishing, worse than any fall he'd ever taken during therapy. He sat down at the piano, fingers trembling. He played the notes she'd once hummed without knowing. And then he said the words he should have said last night, "I love you," but she wasn't there to hear them. Trish stared at the ceiling. The city buzzed beyond the windows, but her world felt mute. She hadn't cried. Not yet. Not until she opened her notebook. Her pen shook as she wrote the first line. "He walked toward me with everything but truth." She put the pen down, pressed her hand to her stomach, and finally whispered the words out loud, "I think I'm pregnant." The memory didn't fade. Not in the hours since she left. Not in the silence of the hotel room. Not even as the city lights spilled like melted gold across the windows. Trish lay curled on a stiff mattress, her guitar case unopened beside her, one hand pressed to her stomach. It had barely been a whisper, "I think I'm pregnant," but now that it was out, it echoed through every cell in her body. Not just a possibility, a heartbeat waiting. She sat up slowly and opened her phone. No new messages, no missed calls. Sean hadn't reached out, not yet. And still, all she could think about was the night he touched her like she was music. They stood in front of the glass wall, rain tracing soft rivers down the window like quiet applause. Trish's breath fogged the pain. Her heartbeat thudded like percussion in her ears. Sean was beside her, his arm braced against the frame, his body warm despite the cold radiating from the glass. He turned. She turned too. Their faces were inches apart. She spoke first, voice breaking through the tension. "I want to touch you." His eyes dropped to her lips, then rose again, searching her expression for doubt. "There's no need," he said, barely a whisper. "There's need," she replied. I've never done this like this." His throat moved. "What do you mean?" "I've never done this without fear," she said. "Fear of being used, judged, left." She reached up and pressed her palm to his chest. "But with you, I feel safe." He inhaled sharply. "I've never touched someone I wanted to mean something to," he confessed. "I thought it would be easy, but it isn't." "Then don't be easy," she whispered. "Be real." No clothes were torn, no buttons popped. It wasn't about urgency. It was about presence. She guided his hand to the curve of her waist. He hesitated, then exhaled through his mouth, as though giving permission to himself. He ran his fingers over her back like he was reading a script written only for him. She kissed his collarbone, let her lips trace a path up his neck, to his ear. And that's when he melted, not in lust, in surrender. They moved to the bed, like dancers learning the steps in real time. He laid her down gently. She pulled him with her. No lights on, no distractions, just the two of them, unpacking silence with skin and vulnerability. Her hands roamed his chest, his shoulders, every inch of him that had been behind walls for too long. He closed his eyes as she touched the scar across his abdomen. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "No," he said. "Not when it's you." He held her tightly, tighter than he had anyone ever. His head rested against her sternum. Her fingers traced lines along his spine. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, "This wasn't supposed to happen." She nodded. "I know, but I wanted it to." "So did I." He shifted to face her. "Trish." She met his eyes. "Yeah? I was never saving you," he said. "I was saving myself. I just didn't realize it until you let me touch you." Her throat caught. "You didn't touch me," she whispered. "You held me." Trish wiped her face, realizing only then she'd been crying. The hotel room was still. Her fingers found her phone again. She typed a message, then deleted it, then tried again. "I wasn't leaving you. I was leaving the lie." She paused, then typed one more line. "I need to tell you something. It's about more than us now." She didn't hit send. Not yet. But the message stayed on the screen, waiting. Just like her. He sat in the dark. The music room door was cracked open, the piano untouched. He looked down at the note she'd once left behind on the keys. "Every sound I make is for the day you finally hear me." He had heard her too late. He reached for his phone, typed, deleted, typed again, stopped, because he didn't know if she would want to hear him anymore. But in two separate rooms, in two separate beds, they still whispered the same word into the night, "us." The photo broke the internet before breakfast. It wasn't grainy or poorly lit. No, it was perfect. Sean Motley standing in his garden, holding Trish Stratus close, her head resting on his shoulder, both of them unaware a drone had captured the moment. The headline was instant. CEO's charity case? Inside the strange romance of Sean Motley and the woman who hid him, by noon it had been shared over 3 million times. By nightfall, it was global. She was getting a bottle of water and ginger ale. Her morning sickness had started creeping in, and the cashier looked up with wide eyes. "That's you, right?" Trish froze. The TV in the corner played the entertainment segment on loop. The woman accused of taking advantage of a tech CEO during his most vulnerable state is now facing heat from fans and critics alike. Some call her a modern-day gold digger. Others say it's the love story of the year. She dropped the bottle, left the store without paying. The news followed her out. Is this a publicity stunt? I can't believe you'd use someone like that. I knew you were always looking for a shortcut, and one that made her go cold. Your demo's been pulled. Label doesn't want the smoke. Good luck. She didn't cry. She stared blankly at the screen and thought, this is what he was trying to protect me from. But now it was too late. Sean stood before a wall of TV screens in his media room, everyone broadcasting some version of the same story. He didn't flinch, didn't panic. He simply said, turn it off. His assistant hovered. Should we issue a statement? No. Sir, this could affect your board approval. I said no. He walked away. Or rather, he limped away. His legs still struggled with fatigue, but he didn't let it show. Behind the closed door of his office, he opened the last photo they'd taken together. Trish, laughing, freely, hair messy, her feet on the couch. She hadn't known he was taking it. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered, I should have protected you better. The gossip turned cruel. Bloggers began digging into Trish's past, old social media posts, her SoundCloud uploads. One from 3 years ago that included the lyric, I'll steal what you won't give. Out of context, it looked damning. They called her manipulative, sly, predatory. Her email inbox filled with threats. Her reputation sinking, and worst of all, she was doing it alone. Because Sean still hadn't called. She opened the hotel door expecting room service. It was Sean. No wheelchair, no guards, just him, holding a single paper bag. She blinked. How did you find me? I never lost you. She stepped aside. He walked in, set the bag on the nightstand. You haven't been eating, he said. I've been reading about myself, she replied bitterly. Did you come to add to that? He turned slowly. I came to say I'm sorry. She folded her arms. For what? For building a world so perfectly private that it shattered the second we made something real. She didn't respond. He stepped closer. I know what you gave up. Your career, your name, your peace. And what did you give up, Sean? He paused. My safety. Her arms fell to her sides. She looked up at him, really looked. You love me? She asked. I don't know how to do it right, he said. But I haven't stopped trying since the day you touched that piano. She inhaled sharply, then exhaled. There's something else, she said. He waited. I'm pregnant. His face broke, into shock, then something unnameable. Twins, she added. He nearly dropped the bag. And then, he laughed, tears in his eyes. You're serious? She nodded. Sean stepped forward and dropped to his knees, not because he couldn't stand, but because it was the only way he knew how to say, thank you. And beside her, the man the world misunderstood, the man who nearly lost her because he thought protection meant distance. But now he understood. Protection meant showing up, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it was public, especially when it mattered. Her name was Celeste Ward, once a society darling, now a PR strategist with a cruel talent for weaponizing gossip and an even crueler grudge against Trish Stratus. She hadn't been mentioned once since the headlines broke, but she had been watching, waiting, calculating, because 3 years ago, Celeste's sister, Helena, had been engaged to Sean Motley, and he broke it off without a word. Now, he was publicly entangled with the same woman who accidentally hit him with a car and walked away with his name. To Celeste, it wasn't love. It was a scandal begging to be corrected. All it took was one newsletter. Celeste owned a gossip column under a pseudonym. No one tied it back to her. Not yet. She drafted the story herself. Sources confirm Trish Stratus faked love for record deal. Footage proves it was all a PR setup. No evidence. Just tone, innuendo, doubt. Then came the second headline, Motley's mystery wife, a timeline of convenient appearances, pregnancy rumors, and her manager's silence. And finally, the dagger. What happened to Helena Ward? The real woman Motley abandoned for a nobody with a guitar. The internet caught fire. And Trish? Burned in it. Her manager called, frantic. You've been dropped from every remaining showcase, Trish. Every single one. Trish didn't flinch. She was sitting on the hotel floor, knees pulled to her chest, the pregnancy test now just a memory in a drawer. Sean stood near the window, jaw locked. "I'll fix it," he said. Trish looked up slowly. "How?" "She's attacking you because she can't touch me. She is touching you. Through me." His hand curled into a fist. "This stops today." Celeste was dressed in all white. A strategic decision. Clean, victimized, untouchable. She sat across from Sean in a private room, flanked by lawyers and a quiet photographer pretending to take stock images. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. "You made your point," he said. She smiled. "Have I?" He leaned forward. "I didn't cheat on Helena. I didn't use Trish. But if you want to continue spinning fiction, I'll bury you in truth." She tapped a manicured nail on the table. "It's not fiction if people believe it. That's how stories work." "You mean propaganda?" "I mean power." He stood slowly. No chair, no support. Just him. "Trish is carrying my children." Her lips parted. "I will not let you destroy her because you couldn't keep your sister's heart from breaking." The room went still. Then Celeste whispered, "You just gave me my next headline." Sean didn't flinch. "Good," he said. "Make it loud." Trish sat backstage in a recording studio rented anonymously by Sean's team. No press, no label, just a piano, a mic, and one livestream link shared hours before by his company's official channels. One night only. Trish Stratus speaks for herself. Over 2 million people tuned in within 10 minutes. She walked onto the stage wearing a black silk blouse and no jewelry. Hair pulled back, barefaced, real. She sat at the piano and said softly, "I was never trained for this. I was trained to sing truth. But the past few weeks have tried to erase mine. So let me speak it, before someone else does again." Then she sang, one song, raw, bleeding, honest. He stood in front of flashing lights while I sat shaking in hotel nights. They called me names, he held my hand, and in the silence, I learned to stand. When she finished, she looked into the camera. I didn't steal his name. I earned it by standing beside him when no one else would. The internet exploded, but this time, it was with applause. Not all her staff agreed with her tactics. Screenshots of internal communications surfaced online within hours. Subject line, "Let's hit her pregnancy. No one will defend a woman who lied about a baby." The backlash was instant. Brands pulled support. The blog folded. The headlines disappeared. And Celeste? Silenced by her own arrogance. Sean played a few clumsy notes on the piano. Trish stood behind him, arms wrapped around her belly. "You're getting better," she said. "You made me want to be." She kissed the top of his head. "Now let's tell our story on our terms," he whispered. She smiled. That was always the plan. Or maybe it was Trish. Maybe carrying life had changed the temperature inside her body, and in the spaces between her and Sean. They were talking more, touching more. He was walking, not hiding it anymore. She'd returned to the mansion, one suitcase at a time, slowly replacing absence with presence. But even peace has shadows. And in this house, one of them lived in a drawer. Sean had gone into town for meetings. She stayed behind, barefoot in the studio, sipping tea that actually stayed down for once. The maid passed by and asked if she'd like the upstairs cleaned. "Sure," Trish said. She wandered into his office with a blanket, thinking maybe she'd wait for him there, finish her song notes in his chair. But the drawer stuck out a little. It wasn't locked, and she hadn't meant to look. Not at first, but something told her to. The folder inside had one word on the label, February. Her stomach dropped. February was the month they first kissed, the month he stood for her, the month she thought it all began. Inside, medical reports, scans, therapist notes, and a flash drive. She clicked through pages. Progressive improvement in lower extremity mobility noted as early as mid-January. She flipped again. Unaided walking trials successful, 2 months prior to spouse's awareness. Her fingers clenched the paper. Her vision blurred. He had been walking for months before he told her, and he hadn't planned to tell her at all. The only reason she found out was because she caught him doing it. The intimacy, the emotion, the tenderness they'd shared, built on a half-truth, or worse, strategy. She plugged it into her laptop with shaking hands. There he was, video footage, practicing on his own, talking to the therapist. "I need to wait," he said in one video. The therapist replied gently, Wait for what, Sean? For her to trust me first, he said. Then I'll show her. If she still wants me after that, then it's real. Trish paused the video. Her pulse raced. Her jaw clenched. She wanted to understand, but she couldn't, because all she heard was, I'll test her before I give her the truth. Not literally, but emotionally? Scorch. He walked into the music room and stopped cold when he saw the open laptop. The folder. Her eyes. Where did you find that? He asked. She didn't shout, didn't cry, just stood there, holding the drive between her fingers. You were walking before I ever touched you, she said. He stepped closer. She stepped back. You told me I was the one who helped you stand. You did? No, Sean. I discovered it. You never offered it. I needed to know it wasn't pity, he said, voice tight. She laughed, sharp and bitter. So you waited. You planned. You watched me fall for you, knowing you were hiding the most intimate part of yourself. He flinched. I wanted to be sure, he said. I was already sure. She snapped. Do you know what it's like to give yourself completely to someone and find out they were still holding something back? He reached for her hand. She pulled away. Don't, she said. He told her about the fear, the pressure, the years of being seen as either a genius or a project. He told her that love felt like risk, and that risk terrified him more than paralysis ever did. She listened, but her heart was already halfway down the stairs. 1 bag. 2. Her guitar went in last. She looked at the ring, his grandmother's, the one he slipped on her finger during their second private ceremony. She left it on the pillow, then walked out. Again. This time, pregnant, but without hope. He played her melody, the first one she ever sang in his house, the one she hummed when she thought no one was listening, the one he memorized without permission. The keys trembled under his fingers, not because he couldn't play, but because he finally realized he'd never given her the one thing she gave him freely, trust. The streets of Seattle didn't feel the same. They looked the same. Familiar stoplights, old corner cafes, musicians with open guitar cases playing for spare change. But to Trish, it all felt far away, like she was walking through a city made of echoes. Her suitcase dragged behind her. The strap of her guitar dug into her shoulder, and her hand kept drifting to her belly. Still flat, but no less real. She checked into a quiet, extended stay off Alki Beach under a fake name. No calls, no music, no press. If you've ever felt torn between guilt and love, tell us in the comments. What would you have done? Just the rhythmic hush of ocean waves against windows too dusty to sparkle. She didn't cry. Not at first. There wasn't space for tears when your body was already building something new, growing someone who didn't ask for headlines or lies or luxury. She sat on the couch the first night and whispered softly, You're going to have a mother who tells the truth, even if it costs her everything. Sean didn't move, not for hours. He stayed seated at the grand piano, the same one she played on her first night, the same one he avoided until she breathed life into it. He hadn't eaten, hadn't changed. His staff didn't know what to do. They knocked. He didn't answer. They left notes outside his door. He never opened them. The one thing he wanted to say could no longer be sent in a message or delivered by assistant. Because Trish wasn't just gone. She was finished. At least, that's what he feared. Trish sat on the small balcony of her room, legs tucked beneath her, guitar balanced against her thigh. She didn't have a studio, didn't need one. She had silence. And in silence, songs grew. Her fingers strummed softly as she stared at the ocean. Then she began to sing. I gave you my voice. You gave me your name, but you kept your truth locked deep in. A frame I carried your secrets, wore them like skin, but the one thing I needed, you held deep within. She paused, pressed record on her phone, sang the verse again, this time louder, this time with conviction. She posted it with no caption, no tag, no promotion, just a link. Within hours, it went viral. But this time, they chose her. Comments flooded in. You can hear the betrayal in her voice. I wasn't ready to cry today. This is what real heartbreak sounds like. And one that caught her breath. You don't need his empire. You're building your own. He saw the video, listened to it more times than he could count. Each time, it chipped away at his ego, at his justifications. At the fortress he called self-preservation, she hadn't burned him in public. She hadn't named him, shamed him, or demanded anything. She just told the truth. And her silence was louder than any scandal. Trish's former manager reached out. She's booked out 3 months in advance. Her single broke every streaming record in the indie circuit last week. Sean didn't respond. "You okay?" the voice asked. He hung up. Trish looked out over the water and touched her belly. "I think I'm going to name one of you Ava," she whispered. Strong, quiet, and fierce. She closed her eyes. "I don't know what I'll say if he ever shows up again." She opened her eyes. "But I know I won't stay silent." Sean sat on the floor, surrounded by lyrics she'd left behind, scribbled on napkins, notepads, receipts, all the things he hadn't read before, all the things that revealed she had been writing her way toward him long before she ever touched a key. And now, she was writing her way away. He stared at a single line from a crumpled note, underlined twice. "Love isn't a test, it's a leap." He whispered back, "Then why did I stay on the edge?" It was only meant to be one night. No press junkets, no label deals, no promotion campaign. Just a woman, a stage, and the words the world had stolen from her, and that she was finally ready to reclaim. The flyer was minimal, a black and white image of Trish with her head bowed, a single line in script at the bottom, the truth in her own words. One night only. The venue? A small theater in Brooklyn, but within 24 hours of the announcement, the tickets were gone. The live stream sold out too, and by nightfall, the city buzzed like it hadn't in months. Trish sat alone in front of the mirror. No glam team, just her. Her belly was showing now, soft but undeniable beneath the flowing fabric of her deep plum dress. The twins moved beneath her ribs, as if responding to the music still unplayed. She placed her hands over the curve of her stomach and whispered, "You're the reason I'm not afraid to be seen anymore." She took a breath, the kind that filled you with certainty, then stood. There were industry execs in the crowd, fans with printed lyrics on their t-shirts, women holding signs that read, "You don't owe the world your silence." She didn't break him. She rebuilt herself. And in the very back, hidden under the balcony, Sean stood. No entourage, no announcements, just a man who had come to hear the woman he let go. She walked onto the stage without music, no backing track, no fanfare, just her in front of a piano and an old-style microphone that caught every breath. The room stilled. Her fingers found the keys. She didn't introduce the song. She just played. "You broke me open to heal me, right? You lied, then bled in candlelight. But love still remembers the first time when pain made room for us to climb. I held your hand. You wore your mask. I gave you truth. You gave me tasks. But silence taught me how to speak. And now I sing so I don't break. I won't beg to be believed. I won't kneel to be received. This voice was born from what you hid, and I will raise it for our kid." There was no applause, not at first, only stillness. And then, like a wave that had been building too long, cheers erupted, the kind that shake walls, that pull tears from stone. She didn't bow. She stood there, tears slipping down her cheeks, one hand pressed over her belly like a promise. Sean had never cried in public, not even at the trial after the accident, not when doctors told him he might never walk again. But now, he couldn't hold it in, because this wasn't a song. It was a vow, one he didn't deserve, one he wanted to earn. Just before walking off stage, Trish leaned into the mic. "I didn't come here to be forgiven, or to explain myself. I came here to reclaim the part of me that got quiet, and to say, sometimes, the truth doesn't need a headline, it just needs to be heard." And then, she walked away. As she stepped behind the curtain, a shadow moved. She turned, and saw him, Sean, not in a suit, not with fanfare, just him, eyes red, lips parted, breath shaking. She didn't speak. Neither did he. He dropped to one knee, not out of proposal, but because emotion buckled his legs. She stepped toward him, slowly. He looked up. "I failed you," he said. "I failed us." She said nothing. He stood, then whispered, "But I never stopped loving you, and I don't want to miss one more heartbeat. Yours, theirs, ours." Her hands moved to his chest, then her lips. They kissed, and the entire room faded. Fans watched from the back door, catching only the outline of two silhouettes locked in an embrace. No one shouted. No one interfered. Because sometimes the story deserves silence, just long enough for it to become real. The next morning, the world woke up to headlines they didn't expect. Not scandal, not shame, just one powerful caption beneath a single photo of Sean and Trish leaving the Brooklyn Theater hand in hand. No statement, just a walk. It wasn't scripted. There were no press conferences, no media spin. Just him, walking beside her, not to prove anything, but because love, when real, doesn't need defense, only direction. The photo went viral for reasons no one could explain. There was something in the way Sean looked at her, like she was the only voice in a room full of noise. The internet, once divided, finally unified around one message. He didn't save her. She didn't fix him. They met in the wreckage and chose to build anyway. Sean made calls, personal ones, to every partner who had distanced themselves from Trish, to every venue that canceled, to the exec who once said, "She's too much drama." He didn't threaten. He didn't plead. He simply said, "You dropped someone because she told the truth. Now you'll watch her fly without you." Then he hung up. She didn't want him to fight her battles. But when she opened her inbox that evening and saw 6 invitations from top-tier indie labels, she knew. He hadn't fixed it. He'd simply opened the door she kicked off the hinges. They were finally home, for real this time. Not cohabiting out of obligation, not playing pretend for cameras, but home. Sean stood in the nursery, staring at the empty cribs. His hand trembled on the edge of the changing table. "I'm scared," he admitted. Trish walked in behind him. Of what? He didn't look at her. Of failing them? She came beside him, placed his hand over her stomach. They don't need perfect. They need present. He looked down at her belly, and for the first time, he whispered their names, Ava and Amelia. Sean launched Euphony, the music platform he'd secretly built during recovery, but he didn't put himself at the center. Trish was the debut artist, but she didn't get special treatment. She earned her slot with the same submission process as everyone else. Her album? The first time. Every track was a piece of their story, honest, raw, and defiantly hers. And when it dropped, it shattered every expectation. It was about moments, like Sean reading baby books in bed, muttering through tongue-twister rhymes while Trish laughed beside him. It was about him attending physical therapy not out of necessity, but discipline. It was about opening the locked West Wing and showing Trish the collection of letters he wrote over the years but never sent, to family, to past lovers, to his younger self. She read every single one. Some made her weep. One made her hold him for hours. "If I could go back, I'd tell the scared version of me this. Love isn't a liability, it's a legacy." Trish performed her last live set before maternity leave. Sean stood at the edge of the stage, this time not in hiding. He clapped the loudest. He held her water bottle between songs. He kissed her forehead backstage and said, "You keep singing, I'll keep learning." And she replied, "Then we'll both stay in tune." The clock on the bedroom wall read 3:11 a.m. Trish jolted upright in bed, her breath snagging mid-chest. A hot, sharp pain wrapped itself around her middle and squeezed tight. She gripped the headboard. Then it happened. The sheets were wet. Her body, tense. Her voice cut through the darkness like a whispered thunderclap. "Sean." Sean sat up, groggy at first, until he saw her holding her belly and rocking back and forth. "What? What is it?" "My water just broke." He blinked. Once. Twice. Then shot out of bed like a man who'd missed a flight, tripping over the corner of the comforter. "Hospital." "Bag. Where's the bag?" "In the closet," Trish hissed. "Bottom shelf. Left." He grabbed it, shirtless, heart pounding as adrenaline flooded his chest. This wasn't a board meeting. This wasn't a corporate merger. This was real. And it was now. The city was sleeping, but his nerves weren't. Red lights felt longer than they should have. Sean kept glancing over at Trish, who was breathing through clenched teeth, her head pressed back against the leather seat. Contractions? Every 4 minutes and speeding up. He nodded like it was a business stat, something he could calculate. But he couldn't fix this. He couldn't negotiate the pain away. He could only be there. And he was. Trish gripped his hand as they wheeled her into labor and delivery. Sweat purled on her forehead. Nurses moved fast. Machines beeped. Voices echoed. Sean stood beside her, frozen for one beat too long. Then Trish cried out in agony, and he snapped into action. "Tell me what to do," he said. eyes wild. "Stay," she breathed. So he did. He stayed at her side as time fractured into waves of pain, pushing, breathing, gripping hands like anchors. The cry split the room, tiny, urgent, powerful. "It's a girl," the nurse announced. Trish let out a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. One down. Sean's throat closed up. He saw the slick, squirming infant, red-faced and wailing, and something in him broke open. He was someone's father. Not even 15 minutes later, the second twin was born, louder than the first. Another girl. The nurse grinned. Trish was spent. Tears streamed from her cheeks as both babies were placed on her chest. There, tiny bodies curled into her warmth like they belonged there all along. He hadn't cried in over a decade. Not when he'd broken his spine. Not when his company nearly went under. Not when Trish walked away the first time. But this, watching these two perfect beings lie against the woman he loved, this undid him. He lowered his head against Trish's shoulder and let the sobs come. She touched his hair gently, her own voice shaky. "They're real. We did it." Ava was the calm one, eyes wide and curious even in her first hour. Amelia? The fighter. Her cry was fierce, demanding, but both stilled at the sound of their mother's heartbeat. And Sean, he kept whispering their names, like a man blessing a prayer into existence. Trish filled out the birth certificates herself. Ava Rose Motley. Amelia Grace Motley. Sean kissed the space behind her ear. Perfect. He didn't mean the spelling. He meant the miracle. The hospital room dimmed to soft amber. The babies were asleep. Trish dozed lightly, her chest rising and falling with the rhythm of a mother who'd given everything. Sean sat in a nearby chair with Amelia in his arms, Ava in her bassinet, humming a tune he didn't know he remembered. His voice was hoarse, his eyes red, but his soul, whole. For the first time in his life, the first weeks blurred into one soft, sleepless symphony. Two bassinets side by side, a faint scent of baby powder and lavender, bottles clinking in rhythm with midnight rocking, half-whispered lullabies off-key, sung by a man who once closed $1 million deals without breaking sweat, but now trembled at the thought of a diaper rash. Sean was learning a new language, one built on cries and coos, on swaddles and side glances, on giggles that seemed to echo straight into his chest. And he didn't miss his old life. Not one bit. Most mornings began with Trish in the nursery chair, hair a mess, eyes tired but lit with something fierce, as she nursed one twin while the other rested against her shoulder. Sean would wake before dawn, not from alarms but from the delicate whimper of Amelia or the thunderous wail of Ava. Each girl had her signature cry. He could now tell them apart without even opening his eyes. One morning, as rain tapped gently on the windows, Sean held Ava in the crook of his arm, bouncing gently while humming something tuneless yet soothing. "You're off key," Trish teased from the changing table, smiling despite her exhaustion. "I'm building character. You're ruining harmony." He leaned over and kissed Ava's forehead. "Your mom's a music snob. Don't listen to her." Ava blinked up at him like she agreed. Weeks passed, but one thing never dulled: Trish's hunger for melody. Between feeding, pumping, burping, changing, and soothing, her mind kept composing. Stringing chords in her head, lyrics in the silence between cries. It came out in hums as she rocked the girls to sleep, in whispers when she folded baby clothes. In full choruses she sang softly while doing skin to skin with Amelia. Then one afternoon, as the girls napped and Sean cooked breakfast for dinner, she walked into her small home studio, untouched since before everything had changed. She stood in the doorway, uncertain, then crossed the threshold. It felt like stepping into a part of herself she thought she'd packed away forever. The keyboard blinked awake. The microphone waited patiently, like an old friend. Trish sat down, closed her eyes, and placed both hands over her heart. Out came a song, raw, unrehearsed, broken in places, but it was real. She sang about milk stains and cracked nipples, about Sean's terrible lullabies, about the way Ava looked at her like she was enough, about the fear of failing, about the certainty of love. And when she finished, breathless, shaking, Sean stood in the doorway, eyes glassy. "You wrote that just now?" She nodded. That's your album, Trish." Recording sessions became a new kind of ritual. Headphones on, mic hot, one baby monitor always in view. Sometimes she sang between naps, Other times, she stopped mid-take to feed one of the girls. She called the project Milk and Fire, because motherhood to her felt like both, tender and ferocious, soft and unstoppable. He had no business near a mic. He knew it. She knew it. The neighbors definitely knew it. But one night, during a recording of a lullaby she'd written for the twins, he wandered into the booth, holding Amelia against his chest. "You need harmony," he said. She arched a brow. "You don't even know what key this is in. I have heart. That's what matters." She let him try. And when the playback rolled, it wasn't polished, but it was perfect, because their love, flawed, unexpected, and real, was all over that track. Evenings became their sacred time. Trish on the floor with Ava in her lap, scribbling lyrics in her notebook. Sean with Amelia over his shoulder, scrolling through nap schedules like it was a war map. Sometimes he played producer. Sometimes she let him. Mostly, she let him be a father, the kind who made bottle warmers sound heroic and onesie snapping an Olympic feat. They laughed. They fought over baby wipes. They cried when both girls screamed in unison. But always, always, they came back to each other, back to the quiet, back to the music. On the final track of her album, Trish whispered, "To the daughters who made me a mother, to the man who never asked me to shrink, I sing this not to be heard by the world, but by your hearts when mine forgets the words." She cried after recording it, not because it was sad, but because it was hers. The mansion didn't matter. The studio upgrades, the streaming numbers, even the album's success. It was all background noise. The real song played in that nursery, where off-key lullabies echoed like sacred hymns, where Trish, once shattered by betrayal and heartache, found a deeper rhythm, where Sean, once defined by ambition and physical limits, discovered what strength actually looked like. Two tiny girls had rewritten their story, not with words, but with cries and breath and being. The street outside shimmered in the warmth of an Atlanta evening, honey gold light spilling across tree-lined sidewalks and the hum of life threading through open windows. Inside their home, everything was calm. The twin girls were nestled between their parents, soft sighs escaping their rosebud lips. Sean had one hand resting over Amelia's belly, his other arm stretched beneath Trish's neck. Ava's tiny foot stuck out from the blanket, and he tugged it gently back under with a tenderness no one had ever trained into him. They were reading the same book for the third night in a row. Trish was the narrator. Sean was the page-turner. And life, finally, was something neither of them needed to run from. Sean had once been a man defined by silence, calculations, strategy, untouched ambition. Rooms bowed when he entered. Markets moved with his signature. But love? That had frightened him more than any boardroom failure. Until Trish. Until the crash that fractured more than his body. Until those two little girls who refused to enter the world without screaming their presence into the air like they owned it. Now his calendar was filled not with investor calls or brand launches, but with tummy time, bath songs, and the joy of a well-packed diaper bag. The irony? He never felt more powerful. Because now, his empire had soft curls and giggles, and a woman who looked at him like he was worth the wait. The studio lights felt different now, brighter, gentler. She stood under them not as the girl who had been dismissed, abandoned, or underestimated, but as a woman who had something to say and the voice to carry it. The record deal was inked on a Monday. She brought both daughters with her to the meeting. Matching dresses, two, pacifiers, one giggling, the other drooling on the label rep's shoulder. They didn't just tolerate the disruption, they applauded it. "I want this album exactly as you recorded it," the rep had said. "Unfiltered, real. We're not buying polish. We're buying you." She signed her name and felt no fear. Because she already had everything she needed. The world would hear her music, but her daughters would live it. Sean didn't rebuild his company. Not in the way anyone expected. He stepped back from the chase. Sold half his shares. Appointed a woman CEO who had once been overlooked because she was too emotional. He still advised. Still built. But now his favorite projects had nicknames like Millie Muffin and Ava Avocado. He kept a home office, but most days he worked from the nursery floor, twins in his lap, one laptop open, one bottle warming. The press didn't know what to make of him. He didn't care. Because behind closed doors, away from headlines and stock valuations, he was writing a story that no press release could capture. Evenings were sacred. Dinner together, Always. No phones. No distractions. Just laughter, baby babble, and new stories from their day. Afterward, Trish would sing softly while the girls drifted off. And when the house quieted, Sean would wrap his arms around her, whispering things into her skin that no one else would ever hear. They didn't make love every night. Sometimes they just held each other, breathing in sync, marveling at how far they'd come. But when they did, it wasn't lust. It was worship. Every touch, every sigh, devotion without condition. The book they read together. The storybook they always returned to had a simple title, The Girl Who Taught the Moon to Sing. It was about a girl who lost her voice but found it by lighting others' paths. A man made of stone who melted when he learned to feel. And two stars who reminded them daily what love looked like. They never skipped pages, even when the girls fell asleep before the ending. They read it to themselves as much as to the children. It became their bedtime prayer. That night, as Sean turned the last page, Trish spoke softly. "You remember what the last line says?" He smiled and didn't need to look. And though the world may forget their names, the stars never would. Because some love stories aren't for applause but for the quiet that follows after. They lay there in silence, letting those words live in the stillness. Then Trish kissed his jaw and said, "You're not who I thought I was marrying." He looked down at her, brow lifting. "You're better." There was no grand applause, no viral article, no fairy tale montage, just this. A mother whose voice moved millions, but sang first for her daughters. A father who used to chase power, but now chased crawling feet across a nursery rug. Two girls who grew up knowing love wasn't loud. It was consistent. A home where stories lived on pages, but also in daily choices. They had written a new legacy, not in money or titles, but in the moments between moments. The window was slightly cracked, letting in the gentle rustle of a summer breeze. Sean exhaled, arms full of warmth and the weight of what mattered most. Trish lay against him, smiling into the night, two sleeping girls between them, hearts beating in rhythm. He looked at all three of them and whispered, "This is the only board I ever want to chair." Her story was never about pity. It was about rising from guilt into grace. If this story touched you, hit like, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to Love and Twilight. Let's keep sharing stories that speak to the heart.